So you got to buy the right one. I'm in pursuit right now. All right, good evening. We're learning tonight Maseches Eruvin, Daf Tes Vav, starting at the very top of Daf Tes Vav. Unlike the blot and the half that we learned yesterday, which was very choppy in regards to the topic, today's first Amud is very clean and very clear. It is a break from the hyper nuance of Maseches Eruvin. It is just rather classical Gemara asking a whole slew of questions against one shita of Rava. The whole page until the Mishnah is really very clean, and then we even on the next side it's just an easier daf than usual, and it's Baruch Hashem excited to learn a simpler daf in Eruvin. Okay, here we go. Maseches Eruvin daf Tes Vav, top word. Itmar lechi ha'omid me'elav. You may be familiar with this phrase from the Lamed of Ya'al Kigam, Abaye and Rava. We know that we paskin like Abaye in only 6 cases in Shas, according to some, and according to Rashi says that this is the Lamed of Ya'al Kigam, of Lechi ha'omed me'elav. Now, before we get to the psak of Lechi ha'omed me'elav, what is a Lechi ha'omed me'elav? And for this, we turn to Rashi. First Rashi on the page, Tesvav Maral, Dibur HaMaschel ha'omed me'elav, Shelo hukba sham l'shem tikun mavui, Telo he's minuhu lakach. You didn't put it there. It was there, but you didn't put it there. It's a tree, it's a post that's in the ground, it's a mailbox post, whatever but you didn't put it there for that purpose. That's shot what Rashi says here at the top. You didn't put it there to be a mavui. It wasn't specifically meant for that purpose. Good. Now we know what a lechi omnim me'elav is. It's there by itself without you having prepared it. What's the din? Machlokes amoraim Abaye Amar Have lechi. Rava Amar lo have lechi. Abaye says it's sufficient. It counts as a lechi. Rava says no, it does. No, it does not. The Gemara now qualifies the machlokes as follows: Hey chadelo samchinan oleme esmo, where you did not look at it and appointed it, at least in your mind from yesterday, from before Shabbos. Let's say you see the mailbox, which is perfectly positioned at the edge of your mavui. The mavui's mailbox is a perfect size lechi. It wasn't put there for that reason. If you had in mind to do so, then kule alma lo pligi de lo have lechi. If you don't have in mind, if you don't have in mind, then kule alma lo pligi de lo have lechi. Everyone agrees it's a 0. Fourth line, ki pligi. Where do Abaye and Rava have their machlokes about a lechi ha'omid me'elav? Heicha de samchinan ale me'esmol. That's where I looked at it before Shabbos and said, perfect. The mailbox can be my mavui. Abaye Omar have lechi de hasamchinan ale me'esmol. Abaye says that my intention from yesterday, just looking at that mailbox and saying, you're going to be my lechi. I didn't hit it in the ground that way and for that purpose, but it functions that way, it will count. Rava Amar lo have lechi. Why? Kevan de me'ikara lava daite de hachi avidi lo have lechi. Since from the beginning, from when it was put in the ground, it was not your intention that it should be used this way, therefore it's not a lechi. All right, very clean machlokas, one qualification. If we stopped right here, the Gemara would seem to say that the only machlokas is where they both agreed that you were somech me'esmol. You said on Erev Shabbos, the mailbox at the edge of the mavui is perfectly, let's say this thing right here is perfectly positioned at the edge of a mavui. It's got the 10 tfachim, it's wide enough, it's a tefach wide, perfect. Let's say that's enough. Okay, we saw a lot of different cheetahs about how big a lechi has to be. But let's say this is perfect, but I didn't put it there for that purpose. So says the Gemara, that's the machlokes, is where it's there, and I even intended on using it. I even appointed it in my head. I'm using that as my lechi, but I didn't put it there for that purpose. It's already there. Machlokes Abaye Rava. And then says the Gemara, let's see if we can extend, let's see if we can extend this idea, this machlokes Abaye and Rava, not only to the world of lechi, but maybe also to the world of mechitza. Says the Gemara as follows. Kasal kadaitach, what's my habamina here? Just like Abaye and Rava argue in regards to a lechi that was there already on its own, maybe maybe we would say the same exact thing in regards to a wall that's already there. Let's say a wall was already in place, not because of you. The wall was there because the wall was there. It's a line of trees. You didn't put it there. So we're going to have to see how does that work out. So the Gemara's havamina here is that we're able to extend. We're extrapolating from the machlokas that we know exists between Abaye and Rava in regards to lechi, and extending that machlokas, mirroring it over to the world of mechitza. So let's see. We're going to see now 4 different approaches to see if this actually makes sense. Tashma, number 1. Ha'osa sukaso bein ha'ilanos ve'ilanos defanos la. If you make your sukkah among trees, and trees were the walls of the sukkah, kshera. What's the halacha? It's kasher. Well, wait a minute. What did Rava say? Rava said, even if you intended on using it from before Shabbos, no dice. You're not allowed to use it. Well, if that's the case, then it can't be that the machlokas Abai and Rava is about mechitza. Because here we see that Rava's shita can't exist because this source says that we do use a wall, even though it wasn't put there with the intention of being your wall. Answers the Gemara, no. We could even say that source by the sukkah is within line of Rava. In my backyard, I intentionally plant a row of trees so that it will be the wall of my sukkah. Problem solved. Very good, because I did plant it. That's Rava's problem. Until you put it in the ground for that purpose, it's a zero. I don't care how much intention you have. So the Gemara here says, what about the sukkah? Answers the Gemara, even Rava could say that because I planted them 10 years ago. When people install trees, I'm installing these trees to be the walls of my sukkah. Mutter, according to everybody. So that's how Rava would learn this. Ihachi pshita, says the Gemara, I don't need the Tanoim to tell me that. You built a tree, you built a wall out of trees. Why would that not be fine? Answers the Gemara with a concern that we've learned about already. Says the Gemara, maybe we're concerned, as we've learned previously, that there's a formal Isser D'Rabbanan to use a tree. If a ball gets stuck in a tree, you can't take it out. You can't lean on a tree. We spoke about tzidei tzadim, that if you have a hook in a tree, and then you attach your chair to the hook, your swing to the hook, that's mutter. But if it's just a rope wrapped around the tree, that's only tzidei of the tree. That's one side, and that's insufficient. So we were concerned, Mahu Detema, maybe we would have said that we were concerned that you might have thought that without this brisa, that we were concerned that if you planted a wall of trees, that it would not count as your sukkah because we're afraid you might end up using it. Kamash Malan, we're not concerned about that. That was question number one against Rava and against the possibility of expanding the machlokes from lechi to the world of mechitza, and we come out unscathed. Next, Tashma, Hayasham Ilan, there were trees, or geder, or a fence, or chitzas hakanim, or a collection of reeds, nidon mishum diyumad. They're going to be considered as diyumad. Now, in my Gemara, I have a picture here in Rashi. This looks very similar to the pasei biros. It's these L-shaped brackets that surrounded a pit in the middle. So what the Gemara is saying here is that when we're in that scenario, we rely on things that are already in place, even a tree. Same question again, Rava, if what Rava said by lechi expands to the world of mechitza, then what Rava means is that unless you plant it for this purpose, it doesn't count. So how can we have over here a source in the Tanaim by the diyumad, by the pasei biros, by these L-shaped things that surround a pit, as Rashi describes it. But Rava, if what you're saying is true, that it has to be planted for that purpose, then why would this work? This shouldn't work. You didn't plant it for that purpose. Says the Gemara, maybe you did. I'm a planner. So I planned out years in advance. I'm going to plant this right around the pit. It's going to be my diyumad. It's going to be my L-shaped brackets around the bore. If that's so, ask the Gemara, same question. My kamash malan. What have you taught me? Obviously, if you planned something specifically for that purpose, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Says the Gemara. Skip the line there. Skip to the next one. Yihachi my kamash malan. Says the Gemara, kamash malan chitzas hakanim kana pachos mishlosha tfachim. That if you have the chitzas hakanim, it wasn't for the case of the tree that we agree to, but the reeds which you put in, that if you put in kana pachos mishlosha tfachim, that if you put in the reeds within 3 tfachim of one another, the halacha is that it would still work. Kidaba minei Abai me Rabba. This we'll see later in the next parak. This was a question that Abai asked Rabbi. Was this question just in another context? We'll see that hopefully in the next week or so. And that is what the Gemara concludes here as well. So therefore, we tried with source number 2 from the Chitzas Hakanim, and still Rava comes out unscathed, which means that still, up until now, our extension of the machlokas of Abai and Rava from Lechi to Mechitza is still possible. Question number 3, 1/3 of the way down, Tesvav Maral. Tashma, come learn another shtickle Torah from the Tanoim. Ilan hamasich al haaretz. There's a tree, and the branch is bent over close to the ground. Im ein nofo gvoa min haaretz gimel tfachim. If the branch is within 3 tfachim of the ground, and it surrounds the tree in a particular way, or it functions as your wall, right, for another area, so then metaltal and tachtav, you're allowed to carry there. Says the Gemara, if you're allowed to carry there, what about Rava? Rava says you have to plant it for that purpose, and you didn't plant it for that purpose. It's the branch of a tree. You couldn't have even anticipated how the tree was going to grow. You didn't know that the branch was going to fall right there. I have a tree in front of my house. We just had them cut down a branch. Had they not done that before the storm, it would have crushed our car, crushed our neighbor's house. It would have been a mess. We didn't know until we saw it growing that way. How do you know where the branches are going to fall? Says the Gemara, Hachanami b'maya skin, what are we talking about? Says the Gemara, Afal Pikin, we're still going to give the same answer. We did plant that tree with that intention. So Rav Shita is still maintained. If that's so, litaltel bekulo. I don't understand. If this wall is a functional wall, so you should be able, if it's one of your walls of this particular area that you're using, you should be able to carry in it completely. Yet the Gemara here limits as follows. Alama Amar Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yoshua. Why is it that Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yoshua said, Ein metaltalan bo ela beis sa'asayim? Beis sa'asayim is a particular shear. And if you take a look at Rashi here, about 4 or 5 inches above where we are, we'll get a little bit of background into a unique area of an Eruv that we have yet to learn about. Says Rashi, Dibur hamaschil ein metaltalan bo. Im haya hekefo, if the circumference of this space is yoser mi beis sa'asayim, is larger than this amount, than this particular size, kechatzer hamishkan, like the field of the Mishkan, like the courtyard. V'shir zeh nasnu chachamim, listen carefully, l'chol hekef, hamisukan ve'eno masukan. It's kind of enclosed, but it's kind of not enclosed. It's not a perfect Eruv. You're relying on a branch that's draping off of a tree. It's not a great Eruv. It's not great. We allow you to carry, but only beis sa'asayim. So says the Gemara, I don't understand. If what you're saying is that you planted it for this purpose, then why would Rav Huna Bereder Rav Yoshua limit carrying to beis sa'asayim? It should be like a regular thing. It's treated like a wall. If you're saying that the machlokes Abai and Rava extends from lechi to mechitza, then this should be a mechitza too. Answers the Gemara, Mishum dahave dira shetashmisha le'avir. Because when you're using this type of tree, when you're using this type of branch to be part of your mechitza, it's not a regular mechitza like a wall that you'd put up or like a row of trees. This is a branch that happens to be hanging down. It's a space where the shepherds might go to rest for a few minutes under the branch. It's not a regular space, and therefore this space gets beis sa'asayim. This was the third attempt of uprooting our comparison from lechi to mechitza, to saying that Abai v'Rava, their machlokas that existed by lechi extends to mechitza, and we still are standing strong. Question number 4, this one will undo the comparison. First of the longest lines of Tesvav Amaral. Toshma shavas betel shuhu gavoa asara hume arba amos vad beis sa'asayim. You are konesh shvisa, an idea that we're going to speak about a lot. We've spoken about it somewhat in Maseches Shabbos, but to be konesh shvisa is the place where you accept Shabbos upon yourself, and then you have the space that's around you. Okay, so let's say you're konesh shvisa betel on a little mound, and this little mound of earth is gvoa asara tfachim. Gvoa asara, it's at least 10 tfachim off the ground. Its diameter, or if it's a square, whatever the shape is, it has at least a diameter of 4 amos, up to the size of beis sa'asayim. V'chein benaka, had there been a dig out, had there been a hole in the ground, shu amo kasara, had it been 10 deep, like a crater. V'hu me arba amos vad beis sa'asayim. And then similarly, a third case, the kamak tsara b'shiboles mekifos osa. You have your harvested food that's also created a shape whereby you were konesh shvisa in its own rishus. In all of these cases, mehalech es kula v'chutzala alpayim ama, you were konesh shvisa in all of these cases. So says the Gemara, I don't understand, Rava. Remember what Rava's idea is, that you have to be the one to create it. And if you want to give me the same answer you gave me in the 3 previous cases, which is, no, I planted it this way, Bishlama kama lechayai. This word is not lechi, it's lechayai. Bishlama kama, I can understand if you want to argue that the way that you laid out all the produce, lechayai, good. Because a human being did that. So maybe you laid it out in a way where you were the one who placed it, I understand. Fine. Elatel, but if there's a natural hill, you did that? Elatel venaka, if there's a hill or if there's a crater in the ground, Michael and Maymar, did you do that? Come on. It's not talking about planting a tree. We're talking about a mountain. You didn't plant that. Ella, says the Gemara halfway down, we're going to reject this. Remember where we started? We wanted to say the machlokas Abai v'Rava on the top of the page in regards to lechi ha'omid me'elav applies not only to lechi but also to mechitza. Says the Gemara right here, Ella b'mechitzos, we don't make the comparison. B'mechitzos, kulei alma lo pligi, dehavya mechitza. That when you have a wall that pre-existed, everyone agrees that it counts as a mechitza. Ki pligi b'lechi, the only place that Abai v'Rava's machlokas applies is in the world of lechi, like we started, like the first simple 5 lines of this amud. which said they argue by a lechi Yomi Me'elav, very good, clean. Do we argue by mechitza too? Says the Gemara, no, we don't. Ki pligi belechi, a little bit more than halfway down, almost 2/3 of the way down. Abaye l'taime. Why does Abaye say that he holds the way he does, that it is considered a lechi when the lechi is omed me'elav? Abaye l'taime de'amar lechi mishum mechitza. A lechi functions out the halachos of mechitza. Umechitza ha'asuya me'eleha havya mechitza. Lechi and mechitza are comparable in one way, but not the way we've been comparing it. Abaye's understanding of a lechi is that the halachic mechanism of a lechi is that it is similar to that of a mechitza, and therefore, because a lechi's mechanism is like that of a mechitza, so therefore lechi ha'omed me'elav works like a mechitza, and therefore, if it's pre-existing, you're good to go. But the Rava l'taime de'amar lechi mishum heker. Rava says no. We've seen the sheet already. Rava holds that a lechi is because of heker, and he avida biyadayim havya heker. How do you make a heker? You put something up that wasn't there before. Of course, the mailbox is your lechi, but if it's all because of heker, that's not noticeable. No one's going to look at it and say, oh, you can't carry in the mavui without a lechi. That's ridiculous. That's always there. So by Rava says, "V'Rava l'taime damar lechi mishum heker, i'avida biyadayim havya heker, v'ilo lo have a heker." It can't be a heker without you putting it in. So if it's omed me'elav, no dice. That does not work. And that's the machlokes Abaye Rava. Be'etzem, it's that Abaye holds that a lechi, the mechanism of a lechi is that it functions because of mechitza, and according to Rava, the mechanism of lechi is that it functions because of heker. And therefore, if it's pre-existing, Abaye says mutter because it's like mechitza, and Rava says it's aser because it needs to be put in intentionally for the sake of heker. Says the Gemara, we still need to analyze 3 questions on this machlokes. Toshma, avnei geder hayotzos min hageder muvdalos zumizu. In our houses, the way they lay the bricks is that the bottom row is laid one way. In the next row, all the bricks are centered with the line underneath, right? So you have, whatever the case may be, let's say you have 2 bricks right here. The next brick will be right in the middle. And then, right, yeah, like the staggering of Az Yashir in the Parshas. It's got 2, 1, 2, 1, right? Thank you very much. That's a great idea to use that as a comparison. So that's what the Gemara is dealing with. What if the protrusions on one of the walls is that staggered? Half a brick out, half a brick in. Half a brick out, half a brick in. That's what we see extending into the Mavui. Okay, so that's our case here. Says the Gemara as follows, quoting this case in the Tanaim. Pachos mishlosha ein tzarech lechi acher. If the distance between these protruding bricks is less than 3 tfachim, no need for a lechi, we have lavud. Shlosha, if it's 3 or greater, tzarech lechi acher. Rava, what are you going to do with this? It's pre-existing, yet we see that the source in the Tanaim says that it's perfectly valid to be a lechi, and you didn't put it there to be a heker. So how does that work? Says the Gemara, Rava is just keeping the party line. The reason why we built it that way was to be the heker. In our house, they trim those bricks and wrap a corner, right? That's what they do by us. Rava said, we built it that way. We let the bricks extend out. So every other row had an extension of a brick sticking out so that they'd have a kosher lechi. Perfect. That's how he gets out of it. Says the Gemara. Well, if you intentionally did it, then of course it's mutter. So then what's the whole point of the brisa? Why would you give me a source that says Gemara, Ma'u detema lemesar bin Yanahu Davida? Maybe you did it to make the building stronger. Maybe you did it according to some Mefarshim so that you can connect it to a new wall in the future, but not for the sake of lechi. Kamash malan, we're not concerned about that. And according to Rava, this source in the Tanaim where the bricks are jutting out, one in stagger form, because of the way the bricks are laid out, that will function as an appropriate lechi. So that was attempt number 1 to reject Rava. Let's try again. Number 2, Tashma, 12 lines from the bottom of Tesvav Amud Aleph. Tashma, the Tani Reb Chia, Kosel, Shetzido Echad, Kanus Michavero. So you have walls that are like this Mavui walls, and one is a little bit more inwards. One of the walls, it's a little thicker toward the entrance, or it leans in a little bit. So it says the Gemara as follows. What do we say about that case? Bein shenir mi bachutz v'shava mi bifnim. Whether or not that difference in the wall is only noticeable from the outside and the same from the inside, or reverse. Uvein shenir mi bifnim, the people in the mavui can see it, v'shava mi bachutz, and the people on the outside cannot. Either way, nidon mishum lechi. Rava. Same question again. You said this type of lechi wouldn't work because you didn't build it intentionally that way. So why do we have a source in the Tanaim that says that it works, Rava? Says the Gemara, same answer again. You're not going to get around this. This is how we set up the wall intentionally. We built it on a funny angle so that it would count as a built-in lechi. If that's the case, why then is there a chiddush here? What are you teaching me? It should be pashut that that's mutter, that counts as a lechi. Says the Gemara, hakamash malan. What we learn from here is a side din, having nothing to do with our sugya at all, but a sugya we learned a number of blot ago, and one that can be a little confusing. Here it's very clean. Hakamash malan. What we learn from this sugya is yet another source to validate the shita that nira mi bachutz v'shava mi bifnim nidar mishum lechi. That even if a lechi is only apparent to those on the outside, but to you it is not visible, af al pikein, it still counts as a lechi. And that's the chiddush that the Gemara is saying here.
What's a heker?
A heker is that we're afraid that you're going to carry in a mavui, even though mido raisa, a mavui is a rishus harabin, rishus hayachid doraisa, because it has 3 walls. So here we're still concerned that you're going to violate the issur of carrying in general, because it is midrabanan asur to carry. So the chachamim were matrich, they required Beisilel, Beishamai, Rabbi Eliezer, the shitas we saw a couple of blot ago in the Mishnayos, to make some type of reminder to not carry in that space, because we're concerned that you may mix it up with Rishus Harabim. So the lechi is a reminder. And according to Rava, the lechi is the lumdus of lechi is that it's because of heker, to remind you. And according to Abaye, it's not because of heker, it's halachic mechitza, functions as the 4th wall. So that's what the Mishnah said. Right. All right, that was the third argument. That was the second argument that we had against Rava, and we came out of it okay, because that brisa was built that way, with the wall tapered in to become a lechi. 4th try, says the Gemara, Toshma de Rav hava yasiv be'ahu mavoa. Rav was sitting in a particular mavui. Hava yasiv Rav Huna kamei, and Rav Huna was sitting in front of him. Omar le l'shame, and he said to his servant, Zil aisi li kuza demaya. We've had this line of kuza demaya 3 or 4 times in Shas so far, maybe more. Go get me a pitcher of water, please. De'asa, but before the shame, before the servant could come back, here is what happened. Nafal lechia, the lechi fell down. That's a problem. Can't carry anymore. Remember we discussed this shaila. Do we say mutav shu shogin be'al tumazidin, yes or no? But here, he was still inside. So what happened? Ach v'le stop. He put up his hand. He made a sign with his hand. Stop. Stop walking. Come aduchte. And the servant stood there in place, and he didn't violate the isurim of carrying in a mavui that had no lechitz. And this is derabanan granted, because as just mentioned, a mavui with 3 walls at midoraisa is a rishus hayachid. Only midrabanan do we require this lechi or korah. Amar le Rav Huna. Amar le Rav Huna lo savar lamar lismoch adikla. You're not going to rely on the tree. We have a built-in natural tree sitting at the opening of the mavui. Why wouldn't you use that as a lechi? Who cares if the lechi that you put up broke down? Your intent, the one you put in with intent. We have a tree sitting at the opening. It's perfect. What's your problem? Amar, a little musar. Dami Jaime Rabbanan. This rabbi seems to be kimandalo parshe inishmaisa, like someone never taught him any Torah. If Hashem Yerachem, we're all in terrible dire straits if we don't remember a single din of the Gemara, because that's how the Amoraim were talking to each other. Says the Gemara, how do we understand this? Mi samchinan alei esmo. You think that every tree that's by the entrance of the mavui functions as a lechi? Were you thinking about it before Shabbos, like we spoke about at the top of the Amud? No. So of course it doesn't work. So the Gemara makes a beautiful deal. Taima, what was going on in this dialogue? Taima, the reason why it did not work before Shabbos was the lo samchina. The reason why the tree that naturally grew there, the reason why it didn't work is because you didn't have it in mind. What's the deal? Ha samchinan have lechi. But if you had it in mind, it should work as a lechi. Kasha on Rava yet again, the 7th question on Rava today. I don't understand, Rava. Why do you say that the tree doesn't work if you didn't plant it that way? We have a Mari Makom here that says that you do. From Amoraim that lived earlier than you. Rav and Rav Huna, generation 1, generation 2. Rava, generation 4. You've got Rav. Rava, you got to support your own shita. Says the Gemara, maybe Lema Abai Rava b'delo samchinan alei pligi. Maybe the only place they're arguing is where they were lo samchinan, where they didn't have intention. Ha samchinan alei havalechi. But maybe they both agree that had it been the case that we did have intention to use that tree, that havelechi, says Gemara lo sal kadaita. You can't even think about that. No way. So why not? Because Dahu Barka, a Barka, the Rashi here points out, I think it's Rashi, right? It's called the Yitzia. I don't see there. Yeah, Rashi, 3 lines from the bottom. Rashi says it's a Yitzia. It's like a little porch, or a little, like an offshoot of your house. There was a Barka, there was a little porch. To have a bay Bar Chavu, which was in the locale of Bar Chavu, who was a person. He's quoted by Abaye a number of times throughout Shas, actually. V'havu pligi ba Abaye v'Rava kule shnaihu. And the pole that was holding up the porch was positioned well to be a lechi. But Abaye and Rava constantly argued about it. But the only way they could have argued about it is when they were somech on it, when they intended it before. Otherwise, it's just clean cut. What are you arguing for? Have intentions or don't have intention? But the fact that it's like a real Maseches, the fact that Abaye and Rava looked at that pole that was holding up this porch, and they're like, yes, they're done, they're arguing. It wasn't as simple as did you have it in mind, because if that's as simple, then so therefore the Gemara rejects that example, and we therefore conclude that there, in fact, the machlokes was in regards to not whether or not it was lo samchina, but the machlokes was even where they were somech, what would Abaye hold, what would Rava hold? Ledina, according to many, this, as mentioned, is one of the sources of Ya'al Kegam, and therefore this would be the one place where we hold like Abaye, that lechi ha'omed me'elav works perfectly, and that is Ledina, how we paskin. Next Mishnah, 2 lines from the bottom on Daf Tesvav Amud Aleph. Let's continue. Bakol osin lechayayin. You are allowed to make lechis out of any material. Afilu b'davar sheyesh bo ruach chayim. Even an animal, even something that's alive, potentially even a person. Anything that you can get to stay in place, you tie it down, whatever it is, it's complete. Not a person, but it's completely mutter. It's maybe usher by an animal too. That's some of the poskim write that by veal. There's some shilas about veal because you trap them in a very small location and you force feed them. Maybe it's tzar b'alechem. Some poskim don't allow the eating of veal at all. It's a good shilah. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi. So, anyways, this Tanakama holds it when it comes to a lechi, you're allowed to even use animals. That's mutter. The Reb Meir oser. Reb Meir says that's not allowed. You cannot use animals. Next, the second machlokas of the Mishnah. Umetame mishum golel, that if an animal is used to cover over a space where there is a maze, it could be metame be'ohel. An animal could become tamei that way. Turning to the top of Tesvav Amud Beis, says the Gemara in the Mishnah, says the Gemara v'Rab Meir metaher. What's the third machlokes in the Gemara? The kosvin alav gite nashim. One is allowed to write a get on an animal and give the animal to the wife with the get written on the back of the animal, mutter. Not the most polite way to get divorced, but it might be mutter according to the Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi Aglivi Posel, we'll see why. It's based on lumdus. It's based on psukim and drashas as to why it is that there's a machlokes here. And let's get into that. Tanya, we have a brisa, different names, similar shitas. Reb Meir Omer kol davar sheyesh bo ruach chayim. Anything that is alive, ein osin osolo dofen l'sukkah. It cannot be used for the wall of a sukkah. V'lo lechi lemavui. It is not allowed to be used for a lechi for a mavui. V'lo pasin lebiros. Remember, as we discussed, the L-shaped brackets that surround this unique din that was used by Ola Regalim. These L-shaped brackets, you're not allowed to use animals for the pasin lebiros. V'lo golel kever. You also cannot use these animals to cover over a kever. And seemingly agreeing but expanding upon the shita of Reb Meir, Mishum Reb Yossi Haglili Amru, Af Ein Kosfin Alav Gite Nashim, arguing with our Mishnah and supporting, as our Mishnah says, it's Reb Yossi Haglili. He argues with the Tanakama and yet another Marmakom to say that a get cannot be written on an animal. My time into Reb Yossi Haglili. Why was Reb Yossi Haglili makbid that you are not allowed to write a get on an animal? Says the Gemara, the Tanya, the Brisa writes as follows. The Torah says the word sefer. Ein li ala sefer. Am I allowed to write it on anything else? Minayin l'rabos kol davar. How do I know that I should be able to write a get on many different materials? Talmud lomar v'kasav la mikol makom. That's what the Torah says. V'kasav la. What is it? Sefer krisus. I think that's the rest of the pasuk. V'kasav la sefer krisus. And then it says the Gemara mikol makom. You can write it on anything. In kain ma talmud lomar sefer. So why, if you want to tell me it writes on anything, just write v'kasav la. Why does it say sefer krisus? Says the Gemara lomar lach. Ma sefer, just like a book. Davar she'ein bo ruach chaim ve'eino ochel. Just like a sefer, it's not alive and it doesn't eat. Af kol davar she'ein bo ruach chaim ve'eino ochel. So too, anything upon which you write a get has to have these same two features, which is that they are not alive and they don't eat. Very good. Venus flytrap. They're not really alive. They don't breathe per se. We know they do on the scientific level. The stoma at the end, they release oxygen, they take in carbon dioxide. We know that. Is that breathing in halacha? The stoma not. I don't know if that's an actual nafkamina. If you can give a really inappropriate gift to give as a divorce document, which is a Venus flytrap. It's a terrible idea. But maybe that would be a nafkamina ladina if you have an animal that's ochel, but not an animal that's yesh bo ruach chaim. Right, but it's ochel. So do we separate these two parameters? I don't know. I'm just talking and learning. I don't know how it would play out. So that's how Rabbi Yossi Aglili comes up with his isser that you are not allowed to be kosev gitei nashim on an animal, because we have to make sure that which we write upon does not have the features of ruach chaim and that it eats. The Rabbanan, Tanakama, you wrote in our Mishnah top line, v'chosfen olav gitei nashim. What do you do about this drush of Rabbi Yossi Aglili? How do you get around it? Answers the Gemara, the Rabbanan, miksiv bas sefer. Does it say in the book? No, sefer ksiv, the sviras dvarim ve'almahu da'asa. The word sefer was not meant to be book, la'afuke animal. No, just to write the story. Okay, this husband, this wife, they've agreed to get divorced. Fine, okay, then they just write things down in general. The Rabbanan, you have another question to answer as well. Hi, v'chasavla. We know how Rabbi Yossi HaGalili used the words v'chasavla, which is to make an all-inclusive list of things minus animals. So what Rabbi Yossi HaGalili did is he took the words v'chasavla, sefer, and he said v'chasavla is anything, but sefer excludes animals. So how then does the Rabbanan look at the words v'chasavla? My darshibe, what do they do with it? Answers the Gemara. Hahu mibayle b'ksiva miskareshes. He says that you have to make sure to know that you have to get divorced with writing. What does that mean? Ve'ena miskareshes b'kesef. You can't pay to get divorced. What's the havamina? Because salka daita chamina, I might have argued, hold the iska yitzia lehavaya. Maybe we would have compared the divorce, the yitzia, to the havaya, to the creation of the marriage. Mahavya b'kesef, opening Mishnah and Kiddushin. My son started learning in yeshiva today, opening Mishnah of Kiddushin, kesef, shtar, and bia. So by kesef, if you can be kona an isha with kesef, maybe you can be megarish an isha with kesef. So who says you need to write a whole thing? That's what the Rabbanan used the words of the drasha of v'chasavla to mean, that you cannot say that there's a comparison of the yitzia of a marriage to the havaya of a marriage, and after yitzia b'kesef kamash malan, that you have to do it b'ksiva. I've Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, where do you get that from? That you're not allowed to do that you have to do it in writing and you can't use money. So Hai Svara Minale, says the Gemara, Nafkalemi Sefer Krisus. We have Sefer Krisus. We just from the word Sefer Krisus. Sefer Korsa, Vein Davar Achar Korsa. It has to be something in writing that generates the divorce, but not money. Says the Gemara, V'Rabbanan, what about you? What do you do with that Mari Makom? Hai Sefer Krisus Mibaile Ledavar HaKores Beino Leveina. We're talking about, they use this for a separate drasha, really unrelated to our discussion per se, but more about the mechanics of their, the conditions of their getting divorced. Licha detanya, like the following brisa. Says the brisa, Hareze giteich, here is your get, almenas, on condition, shelo tishte yayin, and almenas shelo telchi lebeis avicha leolam, that you never drink wine and never go into the home of your father. So says the Gemara, that conditional divorce does not work. It says, Ein Zekrisus. Why? Because the conditions that you made never go away. If you ever go there, well, I could always go there again. So Ein Zekrisus. However, Kol Shloshim Yom, if you say within the next month you can't go, then when you hit 30 days, divorced. So this is what the Rabbanan would use that extra pasuk for. The Sefer Krisus is to highlight that when there are conditions in the get, the conditions have to have a time frame. Says the Gemara, the Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, where do you get that from? Nafkalei mi kares krisus, the fact that krisus is in the plural. The Rabbanan, what about the fact that it says kares and krisus? Says the Gemara, lo darshe, they do not make that drasha. And that brings us to the next Mishnah, but just as a sikum hadvarim, a summary as to what we've learned, is that our Mishnah that we learned on the bottom of Tezvav Amud Aleph, turning to the top of Tezvav Amud Beis, spoke about a machlokes in the Tanaim about whether or not you could write a get on an animal. Machlokes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi HaGalili. And the reason that they argue is not because of lamdus, It's not because of external halachos, it's because of drasha. The power of exegesis, of learning the psukim properly to extract from them what Hashem wanted. Very difficult task, one that we are not up for, but that's what the Gemara says. Rabbi Yossi Aglili had a derech in learning, and the Rabbanan had a derech in learning, as we spoke about just yesterday. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. We have to paskin like one of them, but elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. It seems from the Mishnah that we paskin that we are allowed to write al gitei nashim. It's yachid v'rabim halacha karabim. You have the Rabbanan against one sheet of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Next Mishnah, halfway down, a little bit more on Tesvav Amud Beis. Shayara, you have an encampment. Shechansa bebika, you're in the valley while you're traveling. Vihikifuha kli behema, and you take all of the materials of the animals and you surround yourself with them. The halacha is great. You just created a reshus hayachid for yourself. Metaltalin b'socha, you can carry. You have to make sure that the geder is 10 tfachim tall, as always, same rules. Below Yehu, pirtzos yiser salabinyan, it has to be that there aren't more breaks than there are materials. Kol pirtza shehi ke'eser, as long as there's something, any break in the walls that's up to 10 amos mutaros mipnei shu kepesach. We know shehi kepesach. We know these rules that a pirza that's less than 10 is like a pesach. Yeser mikan aser, but if it is more than that, you are not allowed to carry there unless you minimize it. Itmar, what was not spoken about in the Mishnah? Says the Gemara, what was not spoken about is if paritz is ke'omed. We've made reference to this machlokes before, but really this machlokes is directly located here on this Mishnah. Paritz ke'omed, machlokes amoraim. Rav Papa amar muter, Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua amar aser. Rav Papa says, no problem. If it's 50-50, we're lenient. I could already argue on my own. It's a suffix derabanan. It's 50-50. We know it's already reshus hayachid d'oraisa. There's no midoraisa anyways. I'll have to see what his svar is. Rav Papa says it's muter. Why does Rav Papa say it's muter? Rav Papa amar muter. Hachi agmare rachmana leMoshe. This is what Moshe was taught. Lo sifrot ruba. You cannot have 51% of a break, but that's robe. What about 50-50? Muter. So more than 50% is aser. 50-50 is muter. Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua amar aser. Why? Hachi agmare rachmana leMoshe gedor ruba. You need to fence off the majority of it to none. That's what our Mishnah is really indicating. So says the Gemara against the Shita of Rav Huna b'rei Rav Yoshua, below Yehu pirtzos yiser salabinyan. It says that you cannot have more pirtzos than you can have opening. Ha kibinyan mutter. Did you read the Mishnah? Look at the pashtus of the Mishnah. You said you can't have more open space than less, which means that if it's half and half, what's the inference? That should be mutter. Says the Gemara, no, you have to rewrite the Mishnah. Lo tema ha kibinyan mutter ela ema im binyan yeser al hapirtz. You have to reverse the language of the Mishnah. Aval kibinyan my aser. Says the Gemara, Ihachi, if that's the case, lisnei lo yehu pirtzos kibinyan. Then why didn't you just say that it shouldn't be 50-50, and then we'll know for sure that more is problematic? If that should be the case, and that says the Gemara, Kasha, that is a very good question, and we are going to stop right here for the night at the Tashma, 7 lines from the bottom, on the bottom of Tesvav with Beis, wishing you all a beautiful night. Bruchim to you.